Hello and welcome to Coach Talk, the show more interested in ideas and philosophy than facts and history. My guest this week is Mac. He's the only European head coach to win multiple titles, not on G2 or Fnatic. He spent 6 years at MAD Lions, formerly Splyce, before moving to Vitality in 2024. We talked about how to approach scrims, how to scout players, how love plays a role in coaching, and how to manage up. Mac's approach has consistently produced fantastic results, far above the budgets he's been working with, and here he breaks down his values in great detail. This episode is once again brought to you by Coachify.gg. So for those that don't know, Coachify is a coaching platform that, alongside payments, scheduling and practical things, makes tools for coaches. You can set up live VOD reviews, anchor your messages to specific timestamps and videos for future use, and even set up auto-tracking of goals with the Riot API. While I was working, even in the LEC, I was just using a pen and paper, so I understand that learning a new set of tools can be daunting. But with coaching as competitive as it's becoming, anything we can do to set ourselves apart is a fantastic opportunity. And now is as good a time as any to add something new to what you offer and make it as clear as possible for your players. So if you're interested in checking out Coachify.gg, you can do so with the link below. They have a bunch of free options which I suggest you check out first, although there are extra tools more catered to teams behind a paywall. And if you do decide to look into Coachify, please drop me a message on Twitter and let me know your feedback, as we're working together to try and create the best possible tools for coaches. Lastly, if you enjoy this episode, please like, share and subscribe. If you're interested in exploring mentoring or any of the other things I do to support coaches in the scene, follow me on Twitter where you can find all the other links you will need. And now, without further ado, Mac, what is coaching?
Well, do you know when you when you kind of sent me over the prep list for this, the first thing that I thought of when you ask what is coaching is a funny thing about like a historical anecdote about John Wooden, who's obviously like the goat in at least collegial basketball coaching, and a lot of people just consider him as the goat in North American coaching, right? Um, or sports coaching if you're North American. Um, the and there's a really nice anecdote where basically some researchers are doing a study on coaching. They're doing a scientific study on coaching, and they get a bunch of coaches to kind of try and narrow down and provide descriptions of coaching and all this type of things. What's the most important thing to be a good coach, and blah blah blah. And it's really funny because John Wooden's answer is love, and the researchers are a bit put off by the answer of love, and they kind of get him to try and, can you refine, or could you find a different word, could you like elaborate, because love isn't really very scientific. And he's like, no, it's love. Which I love. I think that's really really touching. And for me, coaching is a lot about nurturing, right? It's about, to put it in a single sentence, it's getting the best out of people. And I think in order to do that, you have to be nurturing in a way that works for that person. And I think love is a pretty core ingredient of that, right? Acting with kindness and with love and with empathy and with tenderness when required, and also with firmness when required, right? Depending on the person. So I think that's a good place to start.
So do you think that this is universal, like this thing of acting with love and with empathy? Well, empathy maybe is a different thing, but let's just start with that. Like, do you think with all players, it always has a love component?
I think it will make you a better coach if there is that component. I think I draw inspiration from many different places, and I, I I quite like cartoons and anime and things like this. And one of my favorite shows, um, going all the way back to when I was a kid, but I watched it recently, was Avatar: The Last Airbender. And there's a wonderful story arc inside Avatar, which is the story of Uncle Iroh, who's my favorite character, and his nephew Zuko. And Zuko, for people who haven't watched the show, is this outcast, downcast prince, exiled prince, who is basically horrible. he's a really, really nasty ass person because he's consumed by childhood trauma and he's hell bent on revenge and restoring himself to glory. And the lengths that he goes to in order to achieve that are really excessive. And a lot of his motivation and a lot of his drive comes from rage, you know? And the character development throughout that series, one of the reasons why I love that series so much is because the character development is so wonderful. And watching the story of Iroh and Zuko is fascinating because basically Iroh also follows his nephew into exile in order to take care of him because he refuses to give up on him becoming a good person. And the secret source in that relationship is love. He just refuses to give up on him, and he just continually loves him in spite of all of his flaws and despite the fact that he actually treats him very poorly on many occasions, and he's really quite unpleasant to him, and he just loves him through it. And obviously it's a story, right? But it's a wonderful story, and I think it has a really nice moral. And the moral of the story in the end is that kind of love conquers all, and that being kind is more important than a lot of other things in life. And I think that if you take that lesson into coaching, I think it's a good lesson as a coach. And I think one thing that is something that has actually genuinely helped me in some of my relationships with players. And I think you can, as a person, very easily assume the worst of people when they behave in ways that are frustrating to you or in ways that clash with your beliefs or in ways that hurt other people, which is really common, especially in an environment full of people with fairly limited life experience and often limited social skills, but people who are very, very driven. And often that spills out in very unpleasant ways, right? That's the nature of competition and being in a competitive team. And I think it's so easy when you encounter these behaviors to assume this person's unpleasant, this person is doing this intentionally, this person is manipulative, this person is doing this to hurt this person, whatever, this person is knowingly doing this, right? And I think one of my, it's not exactly a mantra, but something that I like to say to myself to reframe when someone is really angry, right? Like everyone, you go and vent to someone, right? And when you go and vent to someone, you can choose the language that you use, and you can choose to say, this person's an asshole, this person's really unkind, or you can choose to say, that was an unkind behavior. What a silly thing to do, right? And one of the mantras that I use is to just be like, silly boy, silly boy, because it conveys all of those things in the sense that this is someone that I care about. This is someone that actually I feel very affectionate towards in spite of their behavior, and that their behavior is just silly. It's unintentional. It's just an unwise thing to do, but that's it. It's a lack of knowledge, it's a lack of wisdom, it's a lack of life experience, and it's not reflective of who that person is. And I think choosing to look at people in that way will also make you a better coach.
Yeah, I love it. It also shows how it's not that serious, you know. Silly doesn't sound
Yeah.
malicious or, you know, thought out or anything like that.
Yeah. And I like Greg Popovich a lot. That's something I heard him say a bunch of times, like, it's just basketball, guys. Like this is like, you know, one of the most successful basketball franchises ever, and these guys are getting paid untold millions of dollars. At the end of the day, the guy's like, guys, it's just fucking basketball, man. Like, come on. Like, go home to your kids and you know, be a good person, right? And I like that as well. I like not taking life too seriously.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good point. It's easy to forget, I think, with the pressure and stuff. There was a story with Christian Horner, I think, at Red Bull at one point. I'll preface this by saying I'm not very into Formula One. Mostly I watch Drive to Survive, and that's about it. But he was talking about how at one point both of their drivers really didn't get along and they were having like awful arguments and stuff. And he couldn't think about how to get through to them because in a sense you're teammates, but in another sense it's the only person who's got the exact same car as you, so everyone is judging you against each other all the time. And he ended up taking them to a hospital basically to go and see terminal patients as part of a charity thing. And then the idea was that we would have this conversation there. And he said they didn't even need to have the conversation. They went around this ward and they talked to all these people, and it just became so silly. Suddenly, this thing that was like, this guy's ruining my life by the way he's behaving, and like he's showing me up, and we're all doing everything for him, and nothing's about me. And then like, it just, he said they just didn't even, he went in with like loads of stuff that he was going to say, but he just didn't even need to. Once you put it in a bit of context, what we're actually doing, and that's probably more serious than what we're doing even. This is a computer game.
Perspective is one hell of a drug, man.
One of the things as well, have you come across the David Foster Wallace speech, or it's a book as well, This Is Water?
No.
That is, I think, one of the most fantastic speeches ever. I've actually planned several times to get a tattoo of it, but that's a whole other topic. But it's all about that. The basic premise is we have to understand that there's not been a single experience in your life that you haven't been the absolute center of. And our default response to everything, if we don't try, is to basically make it about us. Like, this person is doing this behavior to hurt me, or to put me behind, and to just make the conscious effort whenever we have the energy to just take a step back and realize, like, actually, it's not about me. It's a separate behavior. It's not them. It's just what they've done in this one situation. I think that's really, really, really good.
And separating the behavior from the person, it's so easy to say this is a bad person rather than this person has behaved badly, right? And those are such different things. I read a book recently that I loved, and it's called Why Buddhism is True. And essentially, I have some bias here because the older I get, the more I start to turn towards Buddhism. I read a bunch of Buddhist books in the last year, and I loved all of them. My favorite book of all time is a book called Siddhartha by Hermann Hesse. Hermann Hesse? I don't know. And it's the story of the Buddha, essentially. But this book is Why Buddhism is True is a lot about comparing kind of traditional Buddhist thought and philosophy and teachings with what modern neuroscience and psychology has uncovered about the theory of mind and how the human mind actually works. And one of the really interesting things that it goes into is how your mind is kind of compartmentalized, and how you don't really have this CEO figure. We think of ourselves as the controller who sits in the driver's seat of our mind, right? And that you have this kind of CEO who's piloting the spacecraft, who's sitting at the very top, and all the input comes to the CEO, and then you, the CEO, decide what you're going to do. And the reality is actually that that's not the way the mind works. Your mind has all these different parts, which, at least according to current theory of mind, a lot of the theories point towards the idea that your mind is comprised of lots of different modules, which essentially vie for control, and whichever module becomes empowered to win the battle, to push certain thoughts and actions and behaviors and emotions to the forefront of your mind, is dependent on the stimuli that you receive. So, for example, they did a study where they asked men to choose between X amount of money now and Y amount of money later. And the Y amount of money later was greater, right? Delayed gratification exercise. And they did a control group. And then they did a group where they had shown them pictures of attractive women before they were asked to make this decision. And what they found was that the group who had seen the pictures of attractive women before making the decision discounted the future more sharply and preferred to have the money now. And the theory is that the module of their mind, which doesn't know that it's just a picture of an attractive woman, right? That according to your mind, evolutionarily, you are seeing an attractive woman, and therefore the bit of your mind that is in charge of procuring you a mate and spreading your genes goes, get all the money now, get the resources, get the mate, right? And that's something that is so unconscious, right? And so loads and loads of really fascinating stories about the mind and the way that it's broken down and how that interacts with Buddhist thought and how meditation plays a part in that and all that type of thing. But anyway, that was a really long tangent, just fascinating anecdote. But one of the things that we tend to do as well, evolutionarily, which is beneficial to us evolutionarily, but actually is a distortion of the way that reality works. And this is why I mention it, because it's linked to what you said earlier, is that we have a massive tendency to assume that people who we like, when they do bad things, it's because of circumstance. It's because they're stressed, or they had a tough day, or this person was being an asshole, or they have particular childhood trauma related to this, and therefore their behavior is excusable, and they're still a good person. And when someone that we don't like decides to act or acts in a way that we don't like, we tend again massively to associate it with their character as you are a bad person. You have behaved in a way that was, I don't know, unjust, and therefore you are an unjust person, rather than you've had a bad day. Which makes sense, again, evolutionarily, right? Because it's something that, well, if we are nicer to the people that are nice to us, and we assume that they're better people, and we defend them, then they will be nicer to us in future, and this will help to propagate your genes. And vice versa is true for the people that we don't like. If we are more likely to say bad things about them and harm their character, then maybe other people are less likely to be kind to them, and they're less likely to hurt us, right? So that was a long psychological anecdote, but yeah, I think it's so easy to, coming back to coaching, to land in this horrible confirmation bias distortion of reality, whereby the actions of another person are directly, they're interpreted through the lens of, as you were saying, how does this impact me? Why are they doing this to me? When that's not the way it is.
And it's so much easier to do that for the negative side of things as well. When they do something that positively impacts you, it's easier to think of it as unintentional. But somehow when it's
Yes, yes,
negative, it like
exactly.
has to be intentional. There's a great quote from, I think, the woman who wrote Whole Brain Living, I think it was called. But she says, we like to imagine that we're thinking beings who feel things, whereas really we're feeling beings
Yes,
who think, which I think is a good way to
yes,
recontextualize it.
yeah, yeah. And your thoughts tend to spring up from the well that is your emotions, right? It's not the other way around. And it's not just that you are a feeling being who thinks, it's that your feelings typically determine the thoughts that you will have.
Mm.
And I think that's also something that's so important to understand about coaching, because it doesn't matter how good your knowledge is if you can't get it into the other guy's head by appealing to the way that they not think, but the way that they feel. If you can't get whatever it is that you want them to do to feel good for them, it's not going to work. Or at least you're not going to have everyone pulling in the same direction as hard as they could be.
Mm. So this leads us on to one of the topics that I really wanted to discuss with you, the idea of a growth mindset versus a fixed mindset. It's kind of very, topical, maybe, for great reasons, but still very like the last few years especially seems to be more and more prevalent in all areas of things. Is that same idea of, you are not a certain person, like that action was just that silly action. Um, but one of the things I wanted to ask you is, how does this actually manifest kind of in day to day, this idea of let's have a growth mindset rather than a fixed mindset? How does that actually change how you approach any aspect of the day?
Personally or professionally?
Either.
Okay. So I think having a growth mindset is really tied to what I believe is the number one quality of champions. And I think that the number one quality of champions is optimism. Optimism being defined, I think, in two ways for me. Um, and I get this definition from a book called How Champions Think by Dr. Bob Rotella, very famous sports psychologist. Number one, you are capable of doing X. Very simple. Number two, something good is about to happen. Those are kind of the two ways that I see optimism. And when you encounter a challenge and you are an optimistic person or a person with a growth mindset, rather than looking for the reasons why you should give up, or the reasons why this isn't possible, or the reasons why this is unfair, or the reasons why whatever, right? You look at it from the perspective of, okay, here are the things that I can do to solve it. Here is the opportunity that this presents me. Here is what is under my control. Here are the things that I'm able to do to become a better person to the point that I can get through this adversity. And I think that's the key for me, right? That's for me the biggest thing about having a growth mindset. I mean, obviously I think that's mixing the two slightly, optimism and growth mindset, right? Because technically growth mindset is all about believing that people are able to change over time, right? And I think that applies in many different ways within a coaching or team context, because you can have a great growth mindset with regards to yourself. You know, you can believe that you are capable of doing anything, but that's not necessarily, and that's optimism, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a growth mindset. It might just mean that you believe that you are really smart, right? And not that you can fundamentally change the person that you are in order to overcome something. And if you don't have that growth mindset, when you run into something that you can't do, the conclusion will be, I can't do this thing because I am not fast enough, not smart enough, not strong enough, because I'm bad at this, rather than I can't do this because I haven't worked at it enough yet. I can't do this because I haven't developed the skills yet. So I think they're very closely linked, but technically I think that's more closer to the definition of growth mindset. And it also applies to your teammates, right? When you're in a group sport context, when you're in a team sport context, the way that it applies to your teammates, and this is something we see so often in League of Legends teams, is we suck at this type of composition. We are bad at this champion. We cannot do this. We shouldn't play this champion. We shouldn't waste our time practicing this champion because we are bad at whatever. And that's where that's a big failing in terms of having a growth mindset, right? Or it's a big example of the issue of having a fixed mindset. And for me, that's a big cause of why many teams just don't improve over the course of the year. I think there are many factors there, right? But when since my time in Vitality, I find myself having this conversation with people quite often, people who are not necessarily used to the way that I've done things in the past, which is, why are we playing this champion when we're bad at it? And I'm like, we're playing this champion because we are bad at it. And yeah, we might lose a regular season game in winter, but in summer, when this champion, which has been ubiquitous throughout the competitive League of Legends meta for the last 8 years, when this champion is meta in summer, you're going to be grateful that you spent time on it in winter, because you are able to improve on that in the long term, right? There's nothing fundamentally stopping you, right? I'll use an example. I don't think that Vito will mind this. He's not been a player that's historically been known for his Azir, right? Azir is a really important champion. It's the same as if you're a top laner and you can't play Renekton. Renekton is a really important champion and has been historically for many, many, many years. And so putting in time on those champions now and understanding, okay, we might not be good at whatever it is right now, but we believe that we are able to learn these champions, and there's no reason why we aren't. There's nothing inherently stopping VTO from playing Azir. It's just that he hasn't built up the skill set or the confidence or the concept understanding or whatever it has been in the past that's been an issue for him. There's no reason why inherently about him. There might be things that he doesn't understand yet as a player, and that's not really an issue because those things can be taught easily, right? If you're driven and you work hard and you learn well, there's no reason why you can't learn those things to an S++ level, right? And all of the players that we have in Vitality, their hands are crazy good. They have such good hands. And we say this to them a lot, like, guys, your hands are so good. Your hands are so good. Believe in yourselves. It doesn't matter if you can't do it yet. There's nothing holding you back. The only thing that's holding you back is whether or not you believe you can or can't. And your patience and your ability to be process oriented until such a time as you can do it. That's the only thing that's stopping you. There's nothing about you that is stopping you. And I say the same thing to them about Korean players, you know. So many players are like, oh, I couldn't do that, or my teammates will never be able to do that, or we will never be able to do that. We can't play that champion because we're not as good as LCK teams. I'm like, what? You think just because they're born in Korea, they have an advantage over you? Like, you think that makes them better at League of Legends or what? That's not the way it works, guys. Like, you need to believe. You need to believe that you can. Otherwise, you won't.
Yeah, I think it's so common, and it seems to happen with champions, for example. It seems to kind of go back and forward 100 times a split. It's like, this champion is useless, or like, we cannot play this, and then we cannot not play it, and then all that kind of thing. So just, a few times, I think that if I don't do this, we're just going to be agreeing the whole time, which is okay, but I want to explore these topics a bit. So to play devil's advocate a bit, how do you see this in terms of playing up to your strengths as a player? So you say, I don't know VTO, so I'm going to use it as an example because I know nothing about him. If the things that make him not just very good, but one of the best in the world, are things that are not useful on Azir, like, how does that factor in? How do you know when it's the right time to say, okay, we should play up to your strengths, which is this certain champions or these certain play styles? Or how do you know when that's just being fixed mindset? Like, how do you draw that line?
Sure. So I think there are times to prioritize winning in the short term, like when you're at Worlds. Like, Worlds is not, you don't go there at the most stressful time of the year and go, we're going to learn a new champion, we're going to play a new style. Like, that's not what you do when you go to Worlds, right? And the same for playoffs and things like that. So you need to take on those projects during times of low stress, when people are more capable of learning, when they're less burnt out, when they're less emotional, when they have less on their plate, when they're less tired, frankly. So there's a balance there between when you choose results and when you choose learning. There's also, and I think the reason why that balance is important is because if you get it wrong and you do the other side, let's say you only say, you go, okay, well, we're not going to play any of these champions because we're not good on them. So what's the point? And then you get to playoffs and your champions get nerfed, or let's say you're playing really, really high resource top lane style. Let's say you're playing carry top lane style. And suddenly the meta is Zeri, Lulu, control mage is mid, and you can't play the game without tanks top, because to play League of Legends, you kind of need engage most of the time. Most comps need engage to play League of Legends. And top is the only role where we can get engage. Well, I guess you missed Worlds. If you don't learn it, right? So you need to be able to learn enough to get by in a situation where your current specialism and your strengths are limited by the meta or by enemy teams just banning you out, right? That also happens. Okay, well, we know that such and such only plays control mages, so we're going to ban 2 control mages and pick the third on first pick. Do something about it. And that's a situation that you will really, really struggle with unless you work to diversify a bit in terms of your skill set.
And this comes on to another question I wanted to ask. You were talking before about a previous moment whether you should be, I think it was with Ilasang as well, like forcing engaged supports or playing range supports. And I think there's definitely times when it's best to just say, okay, look, we have to learn this. We have to do this new way of doing things. But then also, if you look at the last Worlds, for example, coming into the World Championship, double AD carry bot wasn't really a thing anymore, and like T1 weren't playing it. And then at a moment, at least it looks like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they knew the whole time that this was the best style and they were just hiding it. But it looks like they were like, well, if we're going to go out, let's at least play our thing, and then suddenly it all changes and everyone goes back. So, how do you try and find that balance of when to say, okay, no, we're going to force this thing that we think is good. We're going to still play carries top because not only are we good at it, but we actually think everyone else is wrong. Like, how do you get to that point, and how would you try and find that for yourself?
I think there's two things to take into account. Number one, I think the concept of meta is vastly overstated and misunderstood or poorly understood in 90% of the year. And the reality is that we play a game that gets patched every 2 weeks with 150 champions. There is no way that our meta read is consistently correct. There's no way. It's just it's so unlikely. It's so unbelievably unlikely. Not to mention the fact that in a meta that changes that rapidly, there is no way that everyone plays that meta well. There's no way. It's not possible. So I think that teams, players, coaches are often far more restricted by the meta than is necessary. What I do believe about the meta is that it is typically informed by item choices, right? By the default strongest items and runes on this patch determine the strongest laning champions, or they make this particular subset of champions very, very strong because their stats are overtuned or whatever it happens to be, right? And then you kind of go from there. But even though you have a subset of champions that might be overtuned, even if they are overtuned, they will still lose versus the things that counter them inherently. Because all champions have a kit that has certain pros and cons, right? Certain interactions. League of Legends champions are, or League of Legends compositions, I guess I should say, the types of League of Legends compositions that you have are a slightly more complicated rock paper scissors, right? It's rock paper scissors lizard Spock, the one from Big Bang Theory. Um, that's kind of the way it is in League of Legends. So even if they're a bit overtuned, it doesn't necessarily matter unless it's like fundamentally broken. And sometimes there are fundamentally broken champions, right? Which where the items are so overtuned or the champion's kit is so overtuned, right? Tahm Kench historically was an example of that, which is why they changed his W to his R. They nerfed the W cooldown from like 8 seconds to like 30, and it was still too broken. And so they eventually moved it to his R, and now it's a like better champion, right? So there will be times where a champion's kit is fundamentally difficult to balance because it just limits enemy options too well in terms of countering it, which was certainly the case with Tahm Kench. Certainly the case with old Tahm Kench. Even so, it's not like that champion had an absurd win rate over the course of League of Legends history, right? And the same for things like how crazily imbalanced Lee Sin was. The champion's been nerfed like 100 times since its release, and is still perfectly playable. And it's perfectly playable in the context of when does this champion's kit align well versus what the enemy composition does, right? So I think realistically, if you understand and plan around those things well and creatively and use the tools that you have well, then you can always break the meta outside of these really fundamentally broken in terms of their champion design outliers, which there are really not many of at a given time. There are really not that many of those champions that exist, right? I think Zeri you had for like the best part of a year was fundamentally imbalanced because her kit is too good. I still think her kit is too good, frankly, because they haven't changed her kit fundamentally. They just reduced the numbers to a point where it's like manageable. But this champion, a lot of the champions, as the game gets older and older, the new champions get increasingly powerful kits, right? But anyway, that's a separate topic. The second thing that I think allows you to ignore or break the meta, whatever you want to call it, is the individual players you have. And some of your players will have their specialisms and good teams are able to bring out those specialisms in a way that is balanced, right? So you talked about T1. Keria is the best range support player in the world, hands down. It's not even close with anyone else in terms of like his lane understanding, in terms of his trading, in terms of his team fighting on range champions, in terms of his raw mechanical skill, in terms of how creative he is. Like, he is the best. Even so, would T1 be able to do that without the roster that they have? I don't know. So, okay, first of all, that's his specialism. And when you have players who are highly specialized, well, you should actively lean into it, right? There have been games where, actually, Game 5, MAD Lions 2023 versus G2, we blind picked Pyke versus Mickey X's Nautilus, which is his best champion, and it's a horrible matchup in Game 5 of the series, and we won because it's Hilly's Pyke. And sometimes you should do that, especially in a best of series, because in a best of series, the rules kind of go out the window towards the end of the series because it's all about who's having a good day, who's, feeling it, who's feeling confident, who's firing on all cylinders, who's in the zone. Those things matter. Who has a mental edge? Those things matter way, 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 way more on the day. And I like to say that, yeah, sure, on paper, what I did in that draft is shit. And I chose to not ban Nautilus because I needed another ban. And I was like, it is just going to play Pyke into Nautilus. I don't care. On paper, what I did was shit, but there's no paper in League of Legends. It doesn't exist, right? That's the good thing about League of Legends. It's a game played by people. It's not played on paper. So I think there's that element of it. There's the human aspect of it. And looping back to the thing with T1, that human aspect of it is not just related to that individual player, it's related to the other pieces in the roster. So I like to say this to my two solo laners right now who, we're trying to teach them because they're both naturally very high resource players. We're trying to teach them how to facilitate for each other. And because you can't always be the carry, right? And we've looked at T1 and I've said, like, look, this Faker is literally the GOAT of League of Legends. He spent a lot of the year playing facilitators so that Keria can play like Keria and so that Zeus can play like Zeus. And then you have Ona, or Wana, actually, I think, who, you look at this guy's Lee Sin. This guy's Lee Sin is so fucking good. It's unreal. What did he spend the year playing? Well, he played a lot of Rel. That's what he played. And the fact that he and Faker play the way they do allows their team to shine individually, right? And that's what it is to be the greatest player, is to get the absolute most out of the teammates that you play with. If you go through your career and at the end of your career, every single one of your teammates says, I played my best League of Legends. I was at the best in my career. The game felt easiest. I felt the most in the zone. I felt the most connected. I felt the most confident I've ever felt while playing with this player. Then you are the greatest player. That's just it, in my opinion.
I completely agree. I mean, there's, well, maybe not after this year, but before this year especially, there was that argument where people who I think primarily to be a bit contrarian would say, maybe Rookie is better than has been better over his career than Faker. And I think in the server you can make a really good argument for that. But I just, over this long a time frame, I don't buy this thing of, well, he just always had bad teammates and Faker's just always had good teammates. It's like, yeah, and then they go somewhere else and they're not as good, and Faker leaves and they're all not as good. So, how much is coming from that? And that becomes just such a big part of the way the game is now. It's not Season 3 where you could just be the best and just one-shot everyone on Zed or on Ari or something like that. So I do think it's plays such a massive part of how the game really works now at the very, very top.
Yeah, the best players make their teammates better. And we literally, during the off season, not even during the off season, after MSI last year, and then after Worlds last year, sorry, I literally went through every single one of JDG and T1's voice comms videos to see what they're doing that we're not. And one of the things that we ended up taking from it, I made a whole like massive ass spreadsheet of all of these links to show our players this is how Faker communicates, because his comms are so good. This guy's composure is literally 100 out of 100. he is unshakable. And just that alone, outside of the fact that the content of what he's saying is really smart, he's really reassuring, he has lots of great ideas, he's super decisive, just the composure and the confidence is worth so much. And you look at that next to the way that Carrier communicates. Carrier is this super emotional guy. Like when he dies, he's when he's winning, he's screaming and shouting. When he's making a call, he's yelling in the mic, right? And for a guy like that to hit his peak, my opinion is that you need a guy like Faker. And I think that the combination of those two players is so incredibly strong. And I think that's a big part of the secret source of T1 and the secret source of Faker's whole fucking career. And this is something that I don't know if he had it when he was younger, but clearly he has it now, right? Something that he's developed is the composure and the confidence and the ability to nurture and lead. And that's for me what makes him the GOAT, right?
Do you think you need both? You need the person who's just going to bring that energy and that excitement, or is it fine if everyone was just calm, composed? They're going to overextend on mid lane or whatever that one from Wales was. they're going to be overextend on the next wave.
I think personally, and there's a culture thing as well, because you look at a lot of Asian players. You look at Gala get a pentakill. This guy's face doesn't move. It doesn't even twitch. It's crazy. It's crazy. And I think that that is more common in the LPL than in the LCK, I would say. My experience, I can only count for my experience. My experience is mostly working with European players, right? I've only worked with 2 Koreans. I think it's important that you have people who smile easily and who laugh easily. I think that brings a lot to a team. If I think back to uh, teammates that I've worked with in the past, and teammates that I still work with, I would say Kazi is one of them. Who Kazi can literally flash into the middle of 5 people to try and get an outplay at 35 minutes, die and fuck the entire game, and laugh. I think that's so valuable. I think back to other players and I think back to the run we had in MAD on 2021. And I remember there's this one specific scenario that I remember where Armut spends literally the entire game getting dove and camped. And at one point, he's playing GP and he has like 2 items when enemy team has 4 or something like that. And he runs to runs to mid lane, does like a double barrel combo and hits someone for like 50 damage. It is like, ha, that showed them, like got him. And he's laughing the whole time. And that makes you really, really tough to beat. That makes you really, really tough to beat because it puts so much pressure on your opponents because they look over and they see you laughing and they hear you sometimes and they're like, "Who is this psycho and why is he happy?" And yeah, I think that's important.
Do you think that was maybe one of the reasons why, like that Mad Run specifically? I mean, even when you guys won against Rogue, it started to feel like even if Rogue are 10k up, it's like how am Mad going to turn it around this time? Which is already not really a question that you want to be asking. It kind of felt like the Rogue players were asking themselves that same question. So do you think that's a kind of key component, the energy?
Definitely. I think we in that team, our number one strength as a team in game was team fighting. That and global usage, I think, were the 2 things we did really well. And we went into every game knowing that even if enemy team was 10k up, we could still win. And against Rogue, we went in knowing that we would win. Not that we could win, but that we would, even when we were 10k down. And it honestly made the game so difficult for them. We had a conversation with this at work the other day. I had a conversation with Hilly about this, where he was talking about how we shared this experience, him on Fnatic and me on MAD in the past, where the scoreboard didn't matter. It didn't matter if you were 0-10. You still felt or you still were aware of the things that you could do rather than moving into a mindset where it's like, okay, I need to scale because I'm weak. We didn't miss any opportunities because of that mindset, right? Even when we were 0-10, it didn't matter because we didn't care. And this is something that Hilly still does. Like, Hilly doesn't give a shit if he dies 11 times. We had a playoff series last split where he died 11 times. And, after that series, he came out and we were like, he was laughing about it and saying like, because he was comforting one of the other players who was quite upset. And he was like, dude, I picked set and died 11 times. You did way better than me. And the one of the things that made me really happy was that the rest of the team turned around and Vito was like, "You died 11 times? I had no idea, bro. I didn't know." And he doesn't care, you know? And the reason is because Hilly doesn't play like he's died 10 times. And there's a way of doing that, you know? And if you do that, you miss on opportunities. And League is all about opportunities because when you're 10k behind, you only have one or two opportunities in 5 minutes time. And if you don't grab them, then you're just going to lose slowly.
Is this something that you can create as a coach, or do you need to sort of scout for it? Is it something that you think you could give to people given enough time, or is it something that's either you just need a Kazi on the team, you just need a Hilly on the team, you need a personality like that?
Well, going back to growth mindset, I
True.
think people are fundamentally capable of changing who they are as a person, given enough time and input. I think you're going to have a lot more challenges with it as a coach, and there are caveats, right? It's not like you can take 5 insanely pessimistic players who are very reactive and passive in game and then expect them to get it and expect it to go well within the space of a year. You need a good balance of those people. But within a normal balanced environment, can you expect a pessimistic and reactive person to develop when given the right tools and the right feedback and enough input into an optimistic person who finds opportunities? Yeah, of course you can. Definitely. It's going to be way easier if you have enough other people who already do it. And it's going to be way easier if you have past examples of it that you can show, right? We literally showed our team the that MAD Lions game when we came back against Rogue in game 5 from like we were like 9k down at like I don't know 18 minutes or something stupid. You know, like we were so doomed. Um, and we realized that actually a lot of our players wouldn't necessarily like we've had that experience. So we as coaches and you know Kazi because he was there, we know that that's possible. But actually, not the rest of the team didn't necessarily have that like foundational belief that you always can. So we kind of went over that with them as a team. I think to answer your question again, the yes, you can. You need the right elements, and one of those elements is to have people who are willing to lead by example on it. It's going to be way easier if you have a big coaching staff, right? If you are the only guy there who's preaching optimism, it's going to be tough. It's going to be really tough. But if you have 3 coaches who are all super bought in and who are all consistently giving feedback on it, then yeah, for sure. And it really depends on the goals that you set as well, right? If you don't actively set it as a goal and prioritize it and invest time into it and help the individual with the resources that they need, the learning tools that they need, the feedback that they need, the like incentives that they need, the type of praise that they need while they're doing it and set the right kind of boundaries, then it's not going to work, right? If you just expect people to be optimistic and constantly talk to them about being optimistic, but then don't necessarily set clear boundaries and give specific feedback on what is and what is not okay, and you let things slide, well, then that's what your culture becomes, right? But that's the strength of culture. So I guess what I'm saying is that if you have an optimistic culture, then it's a lot easier.
Hmm.
And that's under the coach's control, right? That's the coach's job, is to create an optimistic culture.
Hmm.
And that might mean that if someone is consistently dragging down that optimistic culture and you know they don't buy in to the idea of being an optimist and they don't think it matters and they like keep overstepping the boundary, it might mean that yeah, you need to replace that player if that's what you've decided that you want to do. If you think that that's one of the most important things is to be able to bounce back in these scenarios, which I happen to believe, then yeah, then that type of behavior is non-negotiable.
Hmm. And I think the opposite, well, I can say from experience that the opposite is true as well. I remember one of the things with the most recent team that I was on, which was still, you know, a while ago now, the culture was never right. It was never even close to right. It was doomed from the start is a bit too extreme, and there were loads of mistakes that I made around that and not putting enough emphasis on it. And there were, of course, reasons for it to happen and things that are outside of my control, etc. But mostly I would just say it was just so many mistakes that I made. And I think the kind of culmination of it, which is just the opposite of the example that you just mentioned. In one of our last games together, we're playing the French Cup. We're playing a best of 5. And going into that, I'd really thought we'd turned a corner and we'd finally got through to a few key people that hadn't managed to get through to in a year and a half. And I thought it was all going really well and practice was going really, really well. We had a long preseason to get ready for it. But in one of the games, there was no official stream. And so I was watching it from a player's point of view. And I thought we got a decent lead and then we threw at Baron and it was a bit tough, but we tried a few things. And then when I came to review the game later, looking at the perspective, we were 9k up and we lost Baron and we were still 5k up. But it really genuinely felt like the game was they've got an advantage now and all this kind of thing, because of just the opposite of that happening. The pessimism everywhere just sort of seeped into every sept. I don't think that's a word, but had seeped into absolutely everything. So the opposite can be powerful too. So even just getting rid of that, I think, can give you so much value in itself, let alone building this optimism of we can turn anything around and we just need to keep looking for these opportunities because they will come and they will happen no matter the level of who you're playing.
Definitely. And I think as a coach, you need to be really careful about, whose hands you put power into. Because I think that when you are, obviously, in League of Legends, you can't sit there and stand on the sidelines and shout at people and sub them out. You can't do that. If you're a basketball coach or a football coach, you can do that. If someone sets the wrong example and you're willing to die on the hill of your culture and you have non-negotiables, well, you can make it non-negotiable very easily. That option is less there in League of Legends, and so I think this is just good practice for sports teams in general anyway, regardless of the differences between sports and esports. I think you need to have, you can call them enforcers or cultural architects or captain figures, call them whatever you want. You need to have people that exemplify those qualities and are aligned with your vision of the team and that buy into you and your vision and that have your trust and that know that they have your trust. Because without those people, it's hard. It's really hard.
One of the things you mentioned before is when you're coming into scrims, even following the same idea, it comes back to the fixed mindset versus growth mindset idea. You were talking about you're looking for opportunities rather than looking at the mistakes that we made. Just in terms of trying to think of how to phrase the question, how do you go about doing that in a kind of practical sense? Because I think a lot of coaches, especially in ERLs, because we're used to this idea that coaching, don't need to go into the reasons because that's another huge discussion, but coaching basically became, we watch a game, then I just show you all the mistakes you made. Then we watch the next game and I show you all the mistakes you made. And so
how good way of building confidence, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No wonder we have such great cultures. So how do you go about finding opportunities just in terms of a game knowledge point of view? Because if it didn't, I think a lot of coaches, because they're so used to the other way, if you've seen something happen, you can see this is what happened and it was bad, therefore I can retroactively work out what should have been done better. But if nothing happened, how do you see that something should have and retroactively work out what we could have done to create that opportunity or seize the opportunity that they presented to us?
Well, to provide a quick detour, which is very similar to what you just mentioned with coaching culture, I think it's a really common mindset, just not even in coaching, right? My wife has been working on her writing career for a while, and she asked initially, she doesn't so much anymore, but initially she asked a lot of people for feedback on her writing. And when you ask someone for feedback on your writing, what you get is a massive list of all the things they don't like about the work that you've just done. And that's really unpleasant. And it's not good for your confidence. And it's usually not helpful because actually the things that people don't like are usually just their own personal opinion, not like actual writing critique. But that's a separate point. But that is, I think, just a really common flaw in our understanding of what good feedback is. And I think to actually answer your question, the first thing that you have to think about in terms of the way that you implement this in practice is the balance that you want to strike between positive and negative reinforcement and what that is going to create. If you go into a game and one of your players makes a high risk play and it doesn't work, and you highlight repeatedly that this doesn't work and that you shouldn't do this, well, that's what you're going to end up with. You're going to end up with people who don't take that risk. And then you can't be upset when your players don't take risks later on and you miss opportunities if the balance is wrong, right? Then on the other side, whenever something does go wrong, you have a choice as a coach. You can choose to highlight the reasons why it went wrong, or you can choose to highlight how you want them to respond. And the word respond or response are probably some of the most common words that I use on a day-to-day basis. We actually borrowed from basketball the concept of rebounding because I watched I like basketball. I'm interested in kind of basketball history, and I think it's a very cool game, and I think it has a lot of parallels with League of Legends because of the way that the back and forth in the game operates in terms of you have an attacking team and a defending team. The team with the ball essentially has tempo. They score, i.e. they make a play, and then the other team gets to rebound and attack again, right? And that's a really, really similar concept in League of Legends. And it's a lot about ball movement, which is very similar to pressure transfer in League. Anyway, a lot of the attacking concepts are really similar, which is super cool. But in basketball, one of the if you look at a lot of basketball coaches, the number one thing that so many of these coaches focus on is defensive effort. And defensive effort means number one, actually running back. Like after you're done attacking and enemies get the ball, you run. And number two is that when enemies shoot the ball, when your opponent shoots the ball, you rebound. You jump for the ball, you defend the ball, you grab the ball, and you run. And you go as fast as you possibly can to counterattack. And that's the mentality that I approach League of Legends with. So when something goes wrong in one of our games, we will obviously there are some things that you should where this went wrong, we need to figure out why, because this is something that we've done wrong 5 times in a row, so there's a concept we don't understand here. But when it's you die to a gank on bot and it's an isolated incident, or you make a high risk play and it doesn't work out and it's an isolated incident, and it's a concept that is outside of the thing that you're actually really focusing on, or maybe it's not even concept related, maybe it's just purely execution related, right? Sometimes you make a good play, or you do the right thing, or you do something that should be a 50-50 and you get aced. It's 0 for 5. And rather than talking about why did we get aced, oh, because AD carry didn't flash Gragas E, you're much better off talking about, okay, this happened. What did our opponents use that gives us an opportunity to go and rebound, right? How do we counterattack? Did they burn their flash on their AD carry? Do we still have flash on our Alistair, for example, is a big one. Is a big trigger that we talk about a lot, right? And this is something that you have to do this when you have Hylissang on your team, because if enemy AD carry doesn't have flash and we are not attacking him, Hylissang is in physical pain. Like genuinely is in physical pain when the enemy AD carry doesn't have flash and he is on the same screen as us. He's not allowed to exist, and our comms will literally be Varus no flash, AD no flash, AD no flash, still no flash. He has no flash, guys. And that's great because and that's a sense in which Hylissang is an enforcer of this type of mindset of or a cultural architect, whatever you want to call it, of we find opportunity from disaster.
I love having that specific idea, or I don't even know if they have it as a specific phrase, like that thing to kind of get you back into the next thing. There was a Dan Carter talked about this. He's a maybe the greatest rugby player of all time, or definitely one of them. And he had done a lot of work with a sports psychologist, and he actually mentioned afterwards, you quite often when he's walking to the next thing, or like jogging, more likely to the next play, you'd see him sort of like kick himself like a little bit, not in like a punishment type way. But he actually explained it. It was about his thing of his phrase was next job. And he was like, I wanted a physical stimulus, so something to get me out of my head. Like I can just feel my foot touching my leg. Or even he used to, before a kick, like push his boot into the ground, like to just feel the ground, get out of my head and just think like next job. And that idea of, we're all aced and we're sitting there and someone just says like rebound or something like that, I think is a really good thing to kind of like keep people going and keep people looking for it. Now, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, I don't know how true this is because I wasn't involved in the LEC, but there's this idea that always scrimming against MAD when it was, last year was always difficult for teams, I would say, to get value from because of the way they approached it versus the way you approached it, and they were incredibly volatile. So, firstly, before we go forward, is that a fair assessment, you think?
Yeah. I would say pretty much every single year I've ever been on MAD, the scrims were exceptionally volatile. And it's really funny because people come from ERL, where the scrims look much more like competitive games, and they play their first week in LEC, and they're like, what is happening? Because, yeah, I mean, it's really common throughout the LEC. I don't know if MAD... Okay, so I think MAD was certainly up there, but I think it's commonplace throughout literally every team. There are some teams that didn't. Like, I think Rogue was historically one of the ones that actually scrimmed quite well, or closer to competitive games. But when MAD scrimmed G2 or when MAD scrimmed Fnatic, we kind of as coaches would end up referring to them as mechanics check days, because it was literally just like our players trying to ego kill the enemy players and enemy players trying to ego kill us, right? And you get, frankly, my opinion is that you get kind of, you get out of those scrims what you not what you put in, but you benefit from those scrims according to your mindset towards your review and the game and the concepts that you're able to take away from it. Because I still think you can take concepts away from those. Actually, we had a scrim versus an LEC team a few weeks ago, and I spoke to their coach like casually at the studio a little while afterwards, and he asked me how things were going, and I said honestly, it's been really lovely. Like this team, I haven't had any useless scrims in the last like 3 weeks, which is like unheard of. The Vitality roster that we have scrims really, really, really well. I think we've developed a good practice culture, which is a big check for my list of successes for this year, especially for Winter Split. I didn't expect it to be as good in Winter Split as it has been. And he turned around to me and was like, "What? But you scrimmed us? Like even against us?" Because he thought back to the scrim block that we played against them, and it was one of those days where there's like 1,000,000 kills, and I was like, "Yeah, we got loads out of that block," and they got nothing. And I think it just depends on how you view that, right? Because you can look at a super chaotic game and be like, "Why the fuck are you fighting here? What are you doing?" Like, generate some numbers advantages instead of trying to 2v2 kill them over and over again. Or you can say, okay, we tried to 2v2 kill them and it didn't work, and now this is the situation. And what do I want from you right now as players? What info do you guys need to look for in order to make the next play? Because here you have, this guy doesn't have TP, this guy doesn't have flash, your AD carry is about to get his second item spike. Like, what are you doing with this information? How are you adapting? And I think that mindset allows us to get a lot out of scrims, even when people are having bad days individually, or when all of us are having bad days individually. We can still actually train usefully, and that it's not like we won more scrims on Vitality than we did on MAD Lions. In fact, I think our scrim win record is pretty bad, but we actually get something out of pretty much every game we play.
You just get way more opportunities to practice rebounding if you're dying all the time.
Yeah, you do. You get so many opportunities.
So what then is a useless scrim for you? Because is it possible to just sort of apply this kind of thinking to any scrim? And I mean, you're going to take something out of any scrim, like, but you did mention that
Yeah, for
there's
sure.
still the
For
concept of
sure.
use of scrims.
Yeah, I mean, I think a use the scrim is a scrim where people give up. I think it's just that simple. I think even if you are, there are so many scrims that I've been in. Like, it's really common for like when enemy team gets Baron. Enemy team is 6, 7, 8, 9K ahead, and they get Baron, and one team's just like, all right, we FF. That's really common. There are so many games that I've seen played out where let's say the enemy team gets Baron and they're ahead and they've already outscaled you, and you know that you're going to lose the game. There are so many times when I've come out of review and been like, good job for not FFing the game now, because 2 minutes after this, you guys know the game is lost. I know that this game is lost. This game is like 99-1. It's almost impossible to win. But you practiced this important concept. And because you spent 2 extra minutes playing this game instead of FFing, you got a pick on the enemy AD carry and shut him down and got a 1,000 gold bounty. You still lost the game, but you practice this concept of how to create picks on the enemy AD carry when enemies have Nash. And that's going to pay off later on, because for every time you're in this situation this year during practice, which will be a lot because you play a lot of scrims, and you do that and you get something out of it, even though you know you're going to lose the game, there will be 5 other teams, 6 other teams, 7, 8 other teams in the LEC who don't do that. And that's an edge. At the end of the year, those times that you practice that and they didn't, they will stack up, and you will be a better team at playing versus Nash than the enemy team will. You will, and that's one of the things. Again, that's one of the edges that MAD Lions had in 2021. I'm not saying we never FF scrims. I mean, our scrims were not good that year. Our scrim culture was not as good as it is now in Vitality. But that was one of the things that allowed us to be really, really hard to beat. Really, really, really hard to beat, was because we never gave up.
I like talking about just adding more and more chaos into the game, like the further and further behind you fall. It's something you can do. I'm just starting to get more and more interested in, or playing more and more bullet chess games, which I am so bad at. Like, as soon as you put a clock there, I
I'm
think
so
my
bad
chess
at
skill, even if the clock says half an hour, my chess still drops by a half already.
Same.
So I wanted to practice, playing just 1 minute, no increments, just to see what it feels like. And that, it wasn't my idea, but works as well in that same context of like, if I fall behind, I'm just going to make the game as confusing as possible, and you're going to have to take time to work out what to do. And this idea of like, rather than FF, we just increase the chaos a bit, and then if that doesn't go well, we just increase the chaos a bit as well. Yeah. I think can be really productive, again, for that same reason, where maybe there's going to be moments where, okay, you're not going to, maybe you don't turn around a 10k gold lead, although you guys do, but you turn just a slightly disadvantageous position doing that same sort of idea and being comfortable in the chaos, or being comfortable in those game states where there's nothing really on paper to do, or there's like one play out of 100, like you said. So
I remember we had a game against Rogue, one of the ones where we shouldn't have won, and I literally remember someone saying in the voice comms, "We're gonna make this game into a scrim, guys," because we were so doomed. And I think we literally dropped like 3 mid waves in a row and just dove a side lane as 4 people. We ended up winning the game because we were just like doing random stuff. There's a game that I always refer to and laugh about a lot, where it was in 2020 and it was our first year on MAD Lions together, and we had beaten G2 in our first best of 5. And then we had to play them again in the, I don't know, lowers bracket, winners bracket final, something like that, in order to basically make the finals. And the first time around, Caps hadn't played Kalista at all. When they drafted Kalista, they only put it top lane. And so we went into the game, we were like, okay, he's not going to play Kalista. If they pick Kalista, it's going top. So we picked Ezreal, and then Kalista went bot. And they stomped us at level 1. And I remember that Kazi literally, he's level 2 Ezreal, and he's like, guys, I'm going top. He goes and ganks top, and it works. And it works. We still lost the game, because G2 were a way better team than us, but we genuinely got a foothold back into that game with a level 2 Ezreal gank on top lane. And I love players who are willing to do that. I love it.
I think actually we had a similar situation, but had used you guys as like one of our reference points or one of our mirrors, because we ended up turning around a whole best of 5 in a game by just doing that. And I think, again, it might have actually been Ezreal waited in a bush for like a minute on a side lane, because he was just like, I'm waiting here until someone comes and I'm going to try and kill them. I'm going to try and just outplay them. And he did and got a kill. And then he went and waited in the same bush again and got another kill or something like that. And it ended up turning like the whole series round. But it's just a really interesting thing where I think so much of the game is based on like momentum and energy and stuff like that. And it's something that I think it's not that I didn't used to think it was important, but I maybe think it's almost more and more important the more I see it. And these sort of, it's the culture, but it's also the specific energy of the moment that's going on in your team. I think can be just so valuable, either for good or for bad, depending on the work that you've done leading into that moment.
It's not something that's necessarily intuitive to train, right? It's not something that you necessarily sit there and think about, how do I train this quality? But when you play lots of best of fives, you realize how important it is. I remember probably one of my favorite memories of all time from my time on MAD Lions is one scrim that we played where for the entire scrim block, like, we didn't necessarily play particularly well, but it didn't really matter whether we won or lost the games. But for the entire scrim block, the only goal we had was to kill the enemy AD carry as much as possible. And it's something that I didn't ask them to do, and it's something that in the future I actually genuinely think is a good way to train, right? And like I said, when you are when you know you're going to lose the game, setting the team a goal of, okay, kill this person once, no matter what it costs, is a fun way to train, right? And gets useful stuff out of practice. But this just happened organically because it was funny, because the enemy AD carry was dying loads. I remember the entire team like camping in bushes and doing silly stuff and like dropping waves or pushing waves and cheesing their bases or ignoring objectives, whatever it was, just to kill the enemy AD carry. And it was actually good practice because it made us think of really creative ways to think outside of the box and to break the established consensus of where you're supposed to be on the map. This tower is up, therefore you need to catch mid wave here. Or dragon is spawning in 1 minute, therefore you need to push out top and then go into bot, right? Like, if you kill the enemy AD carry, you can break the rules. So breaking the rules first and killing the enemy carry then makes the subsequent sequence, it changes the sequence, right? It changes how the map is set up. And I wish it was something that I had that I could take credit for, that it was a great training, method, because that sounds very intelligent, but it wasn't. It was just funny at the time. And I remember all of us just sitting there in fits of laughter on like the 11th time this guy died in the same game, where like we got to the point where we could end the game and we just chose not to, just so we could kill him more. And I feel really sorry for that guy, and I don't know if he knows that that's what we were doing, but good God, was it great.
Is there someone going to listen to this and suddenly have like a moment of like, oh, wait, it was all on purpose?
Good God, it was so much fun.
So when we're talking about like scrim, hand check scrims and stuff like that, do you know that this is what the day is going to be like going in? Or is it based on, like against G2, is it always hand checks? Or like at the beginning of the week is always hand checks and later on it gets more serious? Or
It's mostly opponents. It's mostly opponents, and it's mostly depending on the relationship that your players have with those opponents, right? Like there will always be like let's say one of your players doesn't respect his opposite number, so when he plays versus players he doesn't respect, he plays totally differently, and he will just try and solo kill them over and over and over and over again, and he'll do stuff that he would never do against like better players and disrespect them and greed his recalls and stuff like this and try and solo kill them in 1v2 scenarios just because, like, fuck this guy, I think this guy's shit. That's a really common sentiment, and there's a limit there, right? There's like okay, this is a bit much now, where sometimes you need to step in and have a chat. But generally, my experience is that against G2 and Fnatic, that's what the scrim is going to be like. And to be honest with you, I think that that's actually also how good players play the game. I think that one of the reasons why when you get to LEC and when you get to Worlds, it's actually the same. It's no different when you scrim against Asian teams. They fight non-stop because good players fight you for everything. How many times have you heard people say that about like, what's it like to lane against Faker? Or what's it like to lane against Chovy? And what people say is that they fight you for every single millimeter of space in the lane, every auto attack you do, every single creep, they contest you for it. Good players do that everywhere. They do it in the entire game. And that, especially in scrims, where people's risk tolerance is far, far, far higher. And your teammates are not going to be there in scrims being like, no, 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 don't do that, which is much more common on stage. That's the result, right? But that's frankly just what good players do, in my opinion. And you can see that in solo queue as well.
So how does it not translate to the competitive game then? You know, if that's
because people don't want to look silly and lose the competitive game.
Okay, so if you could, you know, without, I don't know how this would even work in practice, but let's say you could have a switch that you flicked so that both teams could play this scrim like it was competitive games. Would that be useful? Would that be something that you went to all the time, a couple of times a week, never? Like, how much would you use it?
Maybe every so often, especially if we played against a very good team. I would certainly not use it early on in the process because in order to play, like part of the learning process is playing like it's a scrim. Let's say, because when you're playing a competitive match, hopefully, 99% of the time, you know the matchup that you are playing. Like you have played the matchup that you are playing in this game before. Ideally, lots of times, right? Unless you get like surprised in draft, which happens, right? But most of the time, you've played this matchup a lot. And in order to know how the matchup is supposed to go and play like it's an official, right? For example, you're playing versus a lane where you know that you have to give prio on the first wave. Otherwise, you get too chunked and the guy freezes on you and you get ganked and you can't play 1v1. You only know that if you try to push at level 1 in scrims. You don't know that if you don't try. You don't know if you're strong enough to crash the third wave against this guy on this patch with this starting item, with this starting rune, when you take this starting rune. Like there are so many variables and you have to test those variables in order to know what is the correct way to play out the matchup, right? What is the way that you believe is the right way to play out this matchup? And if you don't go and in scrims, you're going to test that, and then you're going to die, and then you're probably going to die again, and you're probably going to die again, right? Like there will be games where you die again and again and again and again because you chose to push the wave at level 1 in a matchup where you shouldn't, and from then on, the enemy jungler is going to camp the living crap out of you, and it's going to be a crappy scrim game, and then you're not going to do it in your competitive match, right? But if you start your scrim with the mindset that you're not going to push at level 1, well, then you're going to miss out on advantages because pushing at level 1 is better than not pushing at level 1, generally speaking. And you're just not going to know if you can or not, and that's an issue.
I think the same. I've been this year because I've been working with coaches from kind of all over the place. I've seen games at a different level or lower level than I've seen before. And not only that thing you said about ERL players coming into the LEC, the same applies when you look at Division 2 or minor leagues or something. It's like the higher up you go, the less scrims look like competitive games. So I've seen some scrims that are like unbelievably serious. But the other thing is that people will, in practice, kind of set up everything for a dive, for example, and then not go for it because they think it's not going to work. And I always would say, like, look, if you go for it and it doesn't work, then we still will learn stuff from it. We'll learn, like, okay, here are some of the rules about diving that maybe we don't know because we never dive. Or actually, what you find more often than not is you can do a lot more than you think, especially if you're kind of new as a team. Like when you do the right steps beforehand, you can actually be a lot more aggressive than most people tend to be. But the question I have is that, again, I'm sort of playing devil's advocate a bit here, but is there a way to learn these things, like when we can push the wave and how aggressive we can be, or finding those limits is there a more efficient place to learn this than scrims, or even just a different place to learn this than scrims, you think? Because if, Mike, let's say you're either the thing you're struggling with the most is something in mid game, or even more granularly, maybe your top laner is playing a matchup that they're very comfortable in. They don't need to test the limits. They've done that before. But what they need to do is something about, they need to be just much more confident with the way they engage. So it's great to practice with this certain champion because they need to just pull the trigger a lot more. But then you never get to that point because your bot lane is testing, whether to win or not. I think one of the most extreme situations of that was at one point we had Unforgiven, who obviously you're familiar with, and Hiva in bot lane, and they are just psychopaths. Like when they were laning together, especially. I think this was the first team he was in. There was even a game. It was Draven Callista meta, which is obviously Unforgiven's a happy place. And there was one point where there was a flame horizon when Draven had 102 CS. Because Callista was just being permanently just dove over and over. But the point is there a way to find these limits that's not in scrims, you think? Or do we just not have the tools in the environment we have?
Yes and no. You can watch VODs. That's a great way. You should work smart as well as hard. And you should aim to show up to scrims with an understanding of what matchups you want to play and how you want to play them out. And that's, again, a standard that you as a coaching staff need to set and that you need to adhere to. And you need to make sure that that's a boundary that you set. Because if you have a player who turns up 3 days in a row and is like, I have no idea what I'm doing in this matchup, I'm testing limits, and it ruins the scrim for the rest of the team, then that can't continue to happen, right? So you can have you need to have played this champion enough times in solo queue. You need to have watched some VODs on this champion. You need to have looked at the runes on this champion. If there's something you don't know, ask our analyst. He can help you out with data, right? There are lots and lots and lots of ways to work smart. However, we also play on new patches where there is no data and there are no VODs. So when there's a new patch, especially because we get the patches ahead of time because we play on Tournament Realm, and so we play on the new patch before it deploys on live often, well, then there's no way. If you've already been playing on the solo queue patch for 1 week, by the time your scrim patch changes to the next one, well, then that's if you've been playing on the same patch, right, in solo queue as you're going to play the next week in scrims, then at that point, then again, you can say, okay, well, you need to arrive ready and know what you're going to play. So you can limit it depending on the circumstance, but some of the factors are outside of your control. As a general rule, you should aim to have a standard that you come to scrims with as much information as you possibly can about how to play your matchup so that we can also work on other things, right? And even in a week where you are not playing on the same patch in solo queue and scrims, and the new patch hasn't deployed in solo queue yet, you can still play 1v1s. You can still go into a custom game with someone and test stuff and see, can I get pro at level 1 in this matchup, right? And good players obsess over these things all the time. Good players are so hungry for this information.
I think that's a really good point as well, that you can have a standard and yet still approach the scrims with a flexibility, or you can be forgiving of that kind of behavior in scrim still, as long as you still have this clear standard of these are the things that people need. Because I think there's a bit of a tendency when we're talking about culture, we obviously draw a lot from sport, as we should, because they've been doing it for a lot longer than we have. But there's a very common thing in sport about bringing an intensity to practice and a seriousness to practice and all that kind of thing. And I do think that's great, but I think what some people miss is that practice in sport is not just playing the game. So it's different.
It's not figuring out how the game works.
Exactly, exactly. It's yes, I do agree that when you're doing these drills, we should make sure that we bring an intensity to the drill, because the environment of the drill is already pushing you towards, a relaxed thing where you can not quite go to the line if you're doing shuttle runs, or not quite go over the cone if you're supposed to go over the cone. Yeah. And so you have to bring that intensity yourself. But when you're playing the game, it's almost not quite the opposite. But I think there is a danger of coaches coming in who want to draw from sport and who say, we have to bring this intensity to practice. Look at these quotes from Kobe Bryant or Michael Jordan saying about how they practice so intensely that the game days were easy. Yeah. And that's great when in their environment, but I don't think you can approach every scrim like it's a playoff game. I heard someone say recently, and I was thinking like that. Not only does that sound unbelievably exhausting, I don't think that's necessarily the best. Well, I don't think that's the best way to be learning things, because you do need to be pushing the boundaries to find anything out, because this is the only way we can do it.
So I think there's two perspectives. There's two ways in which you can approach a scrim with ferocity or with seriousness, as if it were a playoff game. You can approach it by giving it the same amount of energy in terms of your input, your refusal to give up, your communication, your mindset, the way that you encourage your teammates, like all of these things. You can bring those things, you can bring your A game without necessarily touching on any of the other stuff that we've mentioned, right? And if we are to kind of make a backwards analogy into conventional sports, if from one month to the next, the weight of the basketball and the height of the net changed, well, you would go through a testing period because the coaches can't know what to coach yet until you know what the optimal way to shoot is, right? Or whatever it is, right? And this happened in basketball. And if you look at the evolution of basketball over the last while, at some point, people realized that the basketball meta was wrong. And they realized that the most efficient way to play the game was to shoot 3-pointers. And the entirety of the way that even the way that you drafted players in basketball changed, right? That's why Victor Wembanyama is so fucking OP. he can like because the guy's so insanely tall and also has great ball handling skills, and he can shoot from outside the rim. He can block people doing 3-pointers. He can do everything, and that's something that, I mean, okay, he still would have been OP in previous basketball, right? But the dynamic of how many 3-pointers are you expected to shoot is something absurd. Like the percentage of baskets scored in basketball that are 3-pointers is like, I don't know how many percentage high. I can't remember what it is, but I think it might even be the majority nowadays of baskets that are scored, and it didn't used to be. I mean, I won't put like a number on it, right? But the way that you play basketball has fundamentally changed, and that it's not necessarily happening to the same degree with League of Legends, but like when you patch a champion to do slightly more damage, it's a bit like putting some extra weight into the basketball, right? Or taking some weight out of the basketball. And when you change the way that the map works in League of Legends, it's a little bit like changing the width of the court, right? Or putting the net slightly higher or something like that, right? It changes the way that you play the game. And if that were the case in traditional sports, well, their practice would also look different.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's really important to have have um, have it as something that's kind of conscious and something that's sort of thought of. And maybe, I mean, I'm a big fan of being clear as possible, of differentiating between kind of exploratory practice and execution practice, where we will need to find out new things and we will have to test things, and there is certain things that you can't test anywhere else but in a game, like as a group, all of us together, and it might cost us this scrim or whatever. But having that right mindset coming in, I think, is really, really important. I want to move on to some of the other topics because I've got many things that I want to talk to you about. You are very well known for scouting, maybe is too simple a word for it, but like putting together the roster, putting together like finding coaches and that kind of thing. How do you go about scouting a player? Like if we start there.
I think well, first of all, you figure out what kind of player you like working with. Second of all, you figure out what kind of niche you're filling. And I think I've heard it referred to as scouting inside out rather than outside in, right? And you figure out what shape the hole is, and then you find the right peg for it, rather than finding the peg that you like the look of the most and jamming it into your team. And I think that's really, really important. Then I think in terms of the actual process, it's a lot about data. And again, the way that you interpret the data depends on your personal preference as a coach and the niche that you're filling in the team, right? But you need to make sure that it takes a long time to build up a lot of the data tools to actually scout people effectively, right? And some positions are easier to scout with data. AD carry, like Unforgiven, was a data-driven signing. It's way easier to sign an AD carry based almost purely off of data because you can see exactly what you need to see. You try and sign a support based off of data, much harder. Try and sign a top laner based off of data, much harder unless they're like a purely carry top laner and that's what you're looking for. Sure, you can see who are the best carry top laners. That's one of the things we did with Chasey, actually. With Chasey, we compared his solo queue stats to Keen and Summit, who were two top laners that we felt were like, okay, these would be guys. These were some of the other guys we were looking at for the position. Obviously, Keen was a pipe dream, but Keen is like, in my opinion, top 3 top laner in the world. And so we compared Chasey's solo queue stats in the same server to those guys, and we're like, okay, he's not a bad fit in terms of the numbers that he's putting out, right? Because we knew the niche that we were aiming for. If you're looking to sign a grouping top laner who plays tanks, that's a terrible test. That's an awful test, right? So you need to figure out the right tests and the right metrics to measure depending on what you're actually looking for. And in order for that, you need to have a consistent philosophy about what it is that you think is important as a team, what qualities you like to have in players, what good roster balance means, what your players are actually good at, who are your like kind of key pieces, and who are the pieces that you are currently developing, who are the pieces that are there as your enforcers and your leaders, and who are the pieces who are there as like individual talents, who are your carry players, who are your facilitators, right? Like the stuff we talked about with T1 earlier are good examples of those. And then I think for me, a lot of it came down to eyeball, frankly, and a lot of it is not necessarily thinking about like I've seen teams who have this process of they get like a big Excel sheet and they have 10 coaches go and watch all of these people's games, and then each coach gives them like a rating, like an early game rating out of 10 and a mid game rating out of 10 and a team fight rating out of 10, and how good are they engaging. And I don't know how well that works for them. Maybe it does work for them, but that's not necessarily the way that I see it, because I feel much more that building a good team is about fit more than anything else. And when you get to this higher level of League of Legends, when you get to the people that are actually good enough to play in the LEC, the differences between them are like, I think they're very difficult to quantify. And I think that they are very variable depending on things like their champion and the role that they're playing within the team. And these things are very easy to conflate with data, whether it's from solo queue or whether it's depending on champion or whether it's because of the context of the specific team that they're playing in. So I think you really need to kind of build up your own thesis about what this player is good at and bad at, and then use data and use other people to then stress test it in a way. But I don't really like viewing players like top trumps cards, where this guy's like a 9 in this and an 8 in this and a 7 in this, right? And I think that I don't like viewing players as simply good or bad. I like viewing them as good at X, Y, and Z, and good in ABC circumstance, and when they have, I don't know, JKL type of teammates, right? So I think that's very much like first and foremost before anything else, that's my approach. And then when it comes down to like literally what we do, well, we watch a lot of their games and we make a lot of notes and we watch the clips that each other look through together, and we try and figure out, okay, will this person be a good fit with this type of person? Does this champion pool fit in well? We look for lots of things that are mindset related as well, right? You do like a sports psychology profiling, you interview them, you get references, you look for whatever qualities you think are important. Let's say one of the qualities that I think is important is loving the game, because when you get to the LEC, you are going to be playing this game a lot. You're going to be playing it every day. You're going to be playing it in scrims. The scrims are going to be hard. They're going to be emotional. They're going to be stressful. You're going to be sometimes playing 3 times a week for 3 weeks in a row. So you're going to have 1 day off a week. And on that off day, you need to play solo queue. So if you don't fucking love this game, you might struggle. Well, no, you will struggle. You will absolutely struggle if you do not love this game and you're playing in the LEC. So how do you test for that? I mean, you figure it out. You bring up your own tests for how you test for that. You look at, I don't know, how much. This is just an example. I've not even done this, right? But it's something that I might do in the future. You look at how much does this person play in the off season? How much do they play the day after they get knocked out of playoffs? How much do they play during the split? How much do they play other roles just for fun? How much do they play Aram just for fun? How much do they play with their friends just for fun? Right? Does this person absolutely love League of Legends? How much time do they spend watching VODs? Are they up to date on all of their favorite teams? How passionate are they about their favorite player? Right? And some of these things are quantifiable and some of them are not. But all of this is coming back to the scouting inside out, right? Where you figure out what it is that you want and then you go after it aggressively. And that, I think, is the simplest way to describe the way that we scout and hire.
And do you have a list of this is what we need from a team so we know what we're missing? Or do you approach each situation where it's like, okay, here we're replacing a jungler and I think the other 4 players need this? Or is it,
Yeah, I mean, you're almost never starting a team from zero. So it's usually a case of this is what we have and therefore this is what we need. Obviously, there are some things that you can't do without, right? Like you can't have 5 quiet players who don't talk, right? You can't have 5 pessimists, or at least I can't. I can't deal with that. I'm not going to do that.
that's exhausting.
It's so exhausting. Sounds like you have some experience there.
Potentially.
So yeah, I mean there are things that are non-negotiables, right? But for the most part, I mean, what's the most players have ever changed in a split? I mean, Vitality was obviously a completely new experience, so it's like, I have to have a conversation with management about these are the types of players that I like to work with, and this is what I think is important. But again, it's more a case of, well, we have these players who are locked already, and this is who is available, and these are the qualities that I think we need. And obviously, I come with my own recommendations there, right? Like when I talk to Vitality, the first thing I'm like, get Kazi and Hilly, please, right? So then you figure out what you need from there in order to make the roster balanced. The most players we ever changed was in MAD 2020. That was 4 players all in one go, and that year was much more of a. I don't think we necessarily thought as much about roster balance then, because that was a year that we were willing to be like, right, we are going to go from 0 and we are just going to go and find some talented kids and build a good culture and see which ones of them are the ones that we really believe in at the end of the year. So that was probably the farthest away from this type of scouting process that we've done, and that's because it was a full rebuild around humanoid. So, but still, we thought about what humanoid needed, right? Like we thought Arome would be a great counterbalance to humanoid. We thought that we knew that Kazi and humanoid were really good friends, and then you don't get like a very passive jungler who doesn't communicate when you have humanoid as your mid laner. You don't do that. You get a really aggressive jungler. So Shadow was a great fit, right? And so yeah, I'd say that was the kind of the farthest away from that type of process we've ever done. That's just like, we think this guy is really good. Let's grab him for a year and see what happens.
Mm. You mentioned about how much they love the game and how much they play it. How does that balance versus this idea of range that I know you guys are kind of big on, and obviously I've talked with Pat about as well last week, because there's only a limited amount of time in the day, and if they are someone who they also play chess and it helps them, and they also do this and this and this, but that's less time playing the game. So how can you work that out in scouting?
Well, there's a point at which playing the game becomes unproductive. Number one, that playing solo queue at 3 a.m. is not productive. I can tell you that. It's not. And people need other things in their life to feel good most of the time, unless they are someone with an incredibly high, ability to tolerate very repetitive tasks. Which you can have those people in your team, of course, right? I think Unforgiven is one of those people who just plays and 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 plays. And there's a place for that, especially if you're AD carry. That's not the worst thing in the world. If your AD carry doesn't necessarily have all the soft skills and the extra things, but he has the best hands and he plays the most champions and he knows his lane matchups the best, that's a role where I can see, okay, being more specialized in the game, I don't have an issue in that role, right? But it depends on the player you're talking about. So I think there's number one, there's working smart. Number two, there's kind of your specialist and the difference between the roles. Number 3, I think that the players who are the most driven and love the game the most will either find ways to relate the concepts that they learn from other things back into League of Legends very easily, because they'll be constantly thinking about League of Legends. But you need to get them to buy into it, of course. And I think number 2, like related to that topic, if you can get them to understand that this is going to help them win, then they'll do it. Simple as that. If they're driven enough, right? I mean, that's easier said than done, and requires a lot of effort and a lot of salesmanship. Let's say it requires a lot of coaching because you have to frame it to them in a way that is palatable to them, and in a way that appeals to them, and you have to find things that are going to feel good for them to do and that they're going to see the results from, and then give them the feedback and tell them, did you notice the consequences of what you did really well there based on this, I don't know, video about communication that we watched together earlier, right? But yeah, I think that should pretty much sum it up.
And so from a scouting point of view, trying to see if this player already has range or is just not as in love with the game as you want. Is it more like there's a minimum sort of threshold kind of thing? So if you see, okay, look, this player in this season, he plays way less solo queue than other people. And as it turns out, it's because he's reading books about being a better captain or a better leader or something like that. Is there a danger there of scouting for players who are really, really focused on playing the game a lot, but also wanting to introduce players or even introduce those same players to this kind of range idea?
You can have a culture clash there for sure, right? And I think you need to have really open channels of communication about it. And as a coach, you can't turn around to one of your players and be like, your job is to have good hands. That's not his job, right? His job is to do X, Y, Z, right? Because like that's not going to sell. That's not going to fly to your really, really driven player who thinks that playing solo queue is the only thing that matters. That's not going to work. So you need to get buy-in from that guy. So you need to really, really demonstrate that you know what you're talking about and that you're worth respecting. You need to lead by example. You need to show him that you work your fucking ass off, but you do it smart. And you need to, get him to start also working smart as well. And then it's going to be way easier to get buy-in on that concept, right? I think it's all comes down to buy-in in the end. Is there a danger that you have a player who like you over-index on mindset things and you neglect love of the game, or you neglect their individual skill? Yeah, definitely. There's a danger there. It's really easy to like not see the really, really good things about some of your existing players in terms of what they're able to do and their skill, just because you don't like their mindset towards something, or you don't like some of their behaviors, or you don't like the way they communicate, or you don't like whatever. And then be like, oh, wouldn't things be so much better if you had this other player who is much nicer and easier to work with and much more collaborative? And it doesn't always work out that way, right? It's not necessarily always the case that the guys that do all of those things well are also like as good individually, right? So there needs to be a balance. I think one way that I've heard it put before, which I quite liked, is that players that are either firepower or glue. I think I also sometimes refer to players as either swords or shields. And you can't have a team with 5 swords in it. You also can't have a team with 5 shields in it. So you need to figure out where you need to have shields and where you need to have swords in your team, and make sure that they complement each other, because League is a game that's played in duos for the most part, right? Mid jungle is a duo, top jungle is a duo, bot support is a duo, support jungle is a duo, top support is not a duo, right? So if you have Zeus who's a sword and Keria who's a sword, and their skill sets overlap, that's fine. That's no problem whatsoever. If you have, I don't know, I don't even necessarily have a good example of like an incredibly facilitator heavy mid laner, but let's say you have a mid laner who's really specialized in like Lissandra, Ari, Galio, all of this type of stuff. Like, okay, Doinby would be a good example. If you have Doinby, you probably also shouldn't have Malrang as your jungler. Assuming I don't even know if Malrang is. It would. I mean, and maybe it would work, right? And it would work if you have Zeus and Keria, or if you have Trimby on bot lane and comp, and then you have, I don't know, Photon on top lane. It will work, right? Because the balance is right. But in general, right? If you if you don't plug the right combinations into that roster, then it won't work.
And then last question on this scouting and stuff. You talked about watching people's games. What do you think about looking at POVs versus trial scrims?
Trial scrims are useless. Completely useless, in my opinion. I hate them. I never do tryouts. I never watch tryouts. I don't do it. I think it's so easy for someone to show up and give their best in a tryout, and so easy for them to just have one really good day, and you're like, oh my god, this person was clapping whichever LEC player that they played against, who I don't know hasn't played the game in 3 weeks, right? Because you realize this the more that you scrim versus academy teams, which you do often at the beginning of the year. You scrim versus academy teams in December, January, and you're splitting scrims. You're going even. You're going 3-3. You scrim with them in March, and you're 6-0ing them, and it's pointless to scrim them anymore because the environments are different and players diverge, right? So the idea that whichever ERL player you're watching is stomping your favorite AD carry in scrims at the beginning of the year in a pickup game where the guy's like just playing because his org is forcing him to play, and he's been on holiday for the last 2 weeks, so he's been watching Worlds. Like he's not played solo. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter at all. So I think watching their you will never get a good idea of a person's mindset from a tryout. You will never, because they're going to come and be on their best behavior, right? You will get an idea from watching their POV during scrims when things are really hard and when their AD carry is completely running them down, and it's the 10th time in a row. Then you're going to get to see who they really are, and that's much more useful. And the same in their POVs, right? In their officials for POVs are also really useful. I think seeing how people respond is super, super important, both in game and out of game, right? How they respond in terms of mindset, and also how they respond in terms of their like default level of aggression in a high stakes match. When such and such comes out of the bush and you're 7-0 on your whatever it is, your carry champion, and you're playing a kind of volatile or fragile champion that's a bit of a glass cannon, but you have flash up, do you step forward to auto attack that guy in the face, or do you step back when he walks out the bush? And those are like small things like that are things that we pay attention to as well, right? I think again, when you get to the top level, it's a lot less about individual skill and a lot more about mindset and fit in terms of, okay, is this guy because there's no player in the LEC who's like 10 out of 10 on all of the champions, right? There's no one in the LEC who's like amazing on Kalista and Draven and Ezreal and Sivir and whatever, right? And also plays mages. Like there's no one that exists like that. So it's much less about figuring out if they are mechanically good, because you might have just watched them in Kalista Draven meta, and in 3 months' time it might be Ezreal, Varus, Sivir meta, and like their mechanical strength is going to be very different in that meta, generally speaking, because players are specialized, because there are a lot of champions in League of Legends. And those champions require different levels of concept understanding and different skills to play to a high level, and not everyone has all of those skills. That's just the way it works, right? So you're much better off looking for how aggressive is this person, how decisive is this person, how confident is this person, how observant is this person, how adaptable is this person, and you get that information not from tryouts. You get that information from looking at how they respond in difficult circumstances, in my opinion. Obviously, there are some people, like, it's not to say that mechanical skill doesn't exist. Mechanical skill exists, right? And there are objective ways of measuring that using data that are, frankly, far easier and far better than me watching all of their trade patterns on 0.5 speed and watching them 3 times in a row. I could spend my time doing that, or I could spend my time doing something else.
Great. I think it's really, really useful for people to consider. I mean, we still see. Yeah, I'm also very much not a fan of the tryout scrims. I think they're much more likely to give you false data than real data. Like either way, I've seen players who either they're really nervous or they're having an off day or something's going wrong, and they also play worse. It's like they're either going to play worse or play better, act worse or act better. Almost no one's going to act the same, which is kind of the thing that you really should be testing.
Yeah, you need to see someone over a much longer sample size. It's the same reason why you don't go and sign a player based on their performance they just had at Worlds. I think it's a huge mistake that people fall into. I mean, look at people like Zeka, for example. Zeka had an insane Worlds run.
Yeah.
And after that, he's been the same mid laner that he was before, which is that he's a good mid laner on his champions, and on outside of his champions, he's less good, right? Like compared to the rest of the pack, he's not necessarily the difference maker that you might have thought he was if the only time you ever saw him play was the World Championship. Whereas at the World Championship, he was absolutely the difference maker, and that's for a huge number of reasons, right? That's because of the environment that he was in. That's because of the bond he had with his teammates. It's because of the trust. It's because of the way his jungle and support played. It's because of the champions that were meta. It's because of what his opponents were doing. It's because of, like, there's so many factors, and you need to have a much longer time horizon when you scout a player than this guy is really good on Akali and Silas.
Yeah. That leads me on to my next question and something you were talking about before, like the next topic. This is maybe too broad a question, but why do you think we struggle so much in having these longer time horizons? Why is it that we still have to be talking to people about the fact that this is a regular season winter game? We can play a champion that we're not good at to learn more about the champion, because this is what we're trying to do. Like having a specific articulated plan. I mean, even that in itself, I think is something that most teams don't do. And sometimes when they do have those plans, they seem a bit I think maybe immature is the right word for it. But why do you think we struggle with it so much?
Number one, because it's unintuitive. I think the idea, which is really present in performance topics kind of universally, the idea that if you focus less on results, you get better results, is a really unintuitive idea. It's not something that you would necessarily realize unless you've done it for a while. And it's an idea that doesn't necessarily apply to the rest of the world. It doesn't apply to business, right? If you are a failing company, generally speaking, you set one focus and you're completely results driven, and your result that you're looking for is we need to be more profitable, or we need to deliver the best customer service, or we need to do whatever it is that's going to save this company. And you go really hard on that one thing in order to save the company, or in order to make the company a better company, right? And the results are tangible, and they're usually proportional to the amount of time and money you invest into it. That's not the way that it works in team sports, because focusing more on results gets you worse results, and spending more money doesn't get you better results. So, and the people who own esports teams are business people, where their world operates totally differently to our world. So I don't think it's necessarily a surprise.
I think there's definitely a space for a role it's quite common in sport. I mean, it depends on the sport. But I think a lot of people, even within the esports scene, seem to be, based on conversations I've had recently, seem to be unaware that it's a position that should exist. I mean, I spoke to Simon Cox recently on the podcast, who is a performance director. That's basically his job in Olympic programs, is to think about the long term and think about the training program and how we're going to peak at the right time and how we're going to learn as much as possible in the times where we're not peaking and all that kind of thing. And I think one of the great things that you do in your work is you take care of that. And in a lot of, like, so that's coming from I was going to say head coach, but technically there's a different name for that now. Is that right?
Technically it's head manager, but yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. So the point is that, that space of someone who's in a position where they can think about the long term, because a lot of coaches just aren't, unfortunately. If you've got a 1-year contract, why are you going to think about how to be the best team in 3 years? But then the people who are there for a long time, you're right, they don't have that performance background, and the way they got to the top level in the areas that they're in, and maybe not considering these things. And I also think a lot of times it is due to just not making it conscious and not kind of thinking it through. And we have this tendency that I still see over and over again. Sometimes it's people not considering the long term enough, and sometimes it's people not considering the short term enough. You have people making decisions that make sense if they want to be playing in October in Worlds, but they've never been to Worlds before. So, like, why are we trying to peak at Worlds time when we've not been to Worlds? Like, the first goal is to get to Worlds, or the classic one is coming into a weekend and prepping to beat G2. When you're playing against G2 and you're playing against two teams who are like next to you in the standings, it's like you've got to be your most important game. If you go 0-3 in the first week, your most important game is the other teams that are 0-3 or 1-2 or something like that. How do you think we can get better at it, or how can coaches start to have more of an impact in this field in the way that you have, or is it kind of an impossible question?
I think managing upwards is one of the things that I learned to do from Peter. And it's one of the things that allowed me to have so much freedom in the first year of Mad Lions when I was like first learning to be a head coach, because Peter was doing all of it for me. And then he taught me how to do it. And I got to learn from watching him and Duke. I got to watch the successes and failures that they had in their relationship with the upper management and how that impacted the level of trust between them, positively or negatively. Um, and so I learned how to communicate effectively upwards, how to set clear KPIs, how to create a long-term project, how to communicate in a way that makes sense to someone who is in a completely different field to you and comes from a completely different background to you, right? The CEO of Mad Lions, Adam Adamu, is a finance guy. So he understands numbers. That's what he's done all of his life. He has a history in investment banking. So when you talk to Adam, you talk about things in a way that makes sense to him, right? Because to someone who has worked in finance all their lives, you see everything in terms of the like assets and liabilities, right? So that's the way that you need to present the information to that person of this is the this is what this person brings to the table that will benefit the company in the long term as an asset. And this is the liability that bringing on that person proposes to the company, right? I think then, and with every management that you work with, it's going to be a different story, right? I think with Vitality, that's the opposite of what they're like, right? Neo is not like that. I mean, we obviously have Nico, who is very much a numbers guy, and we have Anne, who is much more performance, right? So they're very much more of a kind of trifecta, and I think their bases are very well covered. But when you talk to Neo, you don't talk to him about, you don't present things in that way because Neo is like a passionate esports fan at heart, right? So what he needs from you, what makes sense to him, and B, what he actually needs from his coach are very different, right? And with Vitality, I think it comes down to one of the things that I think has been an issue for them in the past is lack of structure, right? Lack of a really, really clear overall guiding structure and guiding philosophy that limits doing this decision impulsively because we think that this player is really, really good and we're gonna spend lots of money on him, right? And setting boundaries of this is the level of involvement that we want the management to have, right? Neo is in the same continent as us. Adam wasn't in the same continent as me, right? So my involvement with him is far greater, which means the relationship needs to be very different in terms of the tone, in terms of the candor, in terms of his relationship with the players, and in terms of the way that I manage his input with the players, right? Because he's not going to do it perfectly, right? I really like Neo. I like working with him a lot. He's not going to like have all of his interactions with the players perfectly in a way that aligns with the tone that I set with the players because he's in the same continent. He's not in the same country, and he has no experience working with me, right? So it's really important that I'm able to have those conversations with Neo in a way that makes him understand, okay, this is the thing that we are trying to prioritize in terms of our culture, and therefore, when we communicate this with the players, I need us to be a united front, and therefore the messaging from you would be really, really awesome if you could do it in this way that sends a different message, right? Um, so I think figuring out what the management needs from you is just as important as like what you need from the management, if not more important, because you're not going to get what you need from the management if you don't give them the the ability to trust you, right? Respect is gained, it's not earned. It's not just because you know more about League of Legends than them that you're going to come in and they're just going to do everything that you say. And I think a lot of coaches start off with this very combative attitude towards their management of, well, the management wouldn't let me do this. Well, what have you done to prove to them that they need to do it? Have you explained it to them in a way that works? Have you got buy-in from them? Do they trust you? Do they really trust your gut feeling enough to go and spend €1 million off your gut feeling? You know, um, and if not, why not? So I think in terms of if you want to have longevity and be able to plan long term as a coach, well, the first step is that you need to get the buy-in from management in you as a leader, and secondly, your vision.
Yeah, I think it's so important for coaches, and I'm really glad you said it, because whenever I go through it with with clients and people that I'm working with, it's always like it instantly goes to the bottom of their priority list. And maybe in the future it won't, but I think I really believe in this idea that you teach people how to treat you, that you're working with, like whether you want to or not. And it's the same applies for loads of different things. You know, if someone messages you on your off day and you reply, then you're teaching them that you can be messaged on your off day.
Yeah, you can teach them intentionally or unintentionally,
Exactly.
right? And if you don't set boundaries, then people are going to cross them.
Exactly. And I think whether we've wanted to or not, so many coaches over the years, or even just esports coaches in general, have taught esports management that we want to be completely isolated and like left alone and all this kind of thing, and just completely separate. And then, of course, if you're talking about millions of euros, why would they ever bet on you for years if you're completely separate and you don't really know each other and all this kind of thing? And so beyond the fact that you have to actually do it and actually put effort into it and approach it as a thing, which I think, to be honest, is the most crucial step, do you have any tips for people to as to how to manage up? Is it something that you're clear about right from the beginning? Do you have a weekly meeting? Do you agree with them how often you want to meet? Like, how do you actually go about doing it now that you're moving into an entirely new space? Obviously, with Adam, you had so much time to build this up. How did you go about it when you first day on Vitality? What's the kind of steps?
I think you need to consider it as a coaching relationship, right? Because you need to assume that you are the expert here, and your job is to get the same as with your players. Your job is to get your understanding into their head in a way that works with them and a way that makes sense to them, so that you have a shared understanding now. And then things become easy. When you have a shared philosophy, it operates as like a prism which refracts light through it, right? Like it's a filter through which you make all your decisions. The decisions become very, very easy when they're put through a filter that says, this is the most important quality that we're looking for in our players. Well, then when you look between 1, 2, and 3 players, it becomes really, really easy for management to see why you prefer this player, even though they really like this player and this guy has a great narrative around him and the casters are saying really good things, right? Like it becomes much, much easier to understand why we're making an aggressive decision to go for this player that they didn't like as much personally. So I think there's that. I think there's considering it as a coaching relationship, and coaching relationships start with empathy. They start with active listening. They start with understanding. Then I think that in terms of your communication with them, you have to be really intentional. I think you have to prove that you're a good leader. I think you have to make sure that you're taking all the responsibility that you can, taking extreme ownership. If you don't know extreme ownership, look up Jocko Willink, who wrote the book Extreme Ownership. I think you need to make sure that you are kind of realistic in your expectations and that you're helping them understand and helping make their job as easy as possible. I think you need to give back to the organization, and like they ask you to do content, go and do fucking content, right? And don't complain about it. I think that's part of being a good leader, and those things will build trust, and you have to gain trust. It's simple as that. I also think that you need to kind of over deliver in terms of your communication and prove that you're being proactive, right? Like in my time during MAD Lions, I like towards the end of it, my meetings with Adam became less frequent, and our check-ins were kind of, how are things going? Is there anything I need to know? Okay, let's talk about this other stuff that's kind of on the horizon, because I trust you and I know that you guys have it covered. That's not a reasonable expectation for me to have at Vitality. So at Vitality, I just had Anne ask me to write up some KPIs for each of our players, and I could have given 5 bullet points or 3 bullet points for each player. I wrote 11 pages because the point is to over deliver on communication during those first years, so that eventually they know that I've got it covered, right? And when you give this communication, make sure that it reinforces the idea that you've got it covered, right? Your communication with them shouldn't be a long list of complaints about your players and the things that are not possible and things that are outside of your control, because then you're just making excuses. What you should present to them is, here is the issue that we've had. This is what happened. This is what I did wrong. And this is what I've already done to fix it. Give them a problem that's already solved. And then they know that you're on it. And there's no need for them to then come in and meddle with your process if they know that you're already doing something about it, right? Hand them a problem, tell them this was the problem, and this is how it is currently being fixed, rather than here's a problem I have no control over, woe is me. Take ownership.
I think it's such a good call out, and just as important in ERLs as well. Like, even if you're there only on a 1 year contract, I think it's still absolutely crucial. And what ends up happening is people end up with just a kind of another excuse of like, oh, we started losing and then management came in and did things. And it's like, well, yeah, but they did things because they didn't know what was going on, and the pressure comes on and it's their money. So
Yeah,
like, obviously what they're not just going to sit by, or even, you know, they're passionate about the game. Or what we're seeing
yeah,
a
for
lot
sure.
in France is they're also challenger. Like, they're also good at the game. Like, they're
Yeah,
passionate
yeah,
about
yeah.
the game. They're good at the game. They want to be involved. And I think what people will find when they do this, if you're listening to this and kind of giving it a go, is that not only will it be good to avoid the bad situations, but you will get a lot more from the organization. And this idea of being proud of where we are and actually gaining something for, like, playing for the badge idea is so uncommon in esports, and yet it's such a big thing in any other sport, you know, like this idea that you can gain a lot from having a better relationship with your organization. It's not just, oh, but I'm busy and I want to work with this player instead, and so I want to write 3 bullet points. I don't want to write 11 pages because that takes time, and that's time I could be better spent elsewhere. Not only is it good to avoid bad situations, but you will also gain a lot from it. And I think people will be shocked at how useful the rest of the organization can be if you treat it like you're coaching it, and treat it like you're getting what you actually can get from it. I think it's such good advice.
For sure. And if you preface your management before shit hits the fan with, we're having this issue and I think this might be a problem in future. If this is here's what we're doing right now to try to limit that problem. If the worst case happens, well, then we'll need to think about X, Y, and Z, and maybe we'll do ABC, right? That that is going to prevent your management from panicking and coming in and making changes when shit does hit the fan, because again, you've shown them that you know what's going on and you're on it, and they can trust you, right? And I think when management does want to be involved, people often have such a hostile reaction to it. And again, there are boundaries you need to set, right? And there are boundaries that I've set with Vitality this split, right? Like, hey, when we're doing this, when we're at the ADC studio was one example. I need us to be less results focused because I don't talk to players about results, and so I need you as management to not talk to them about, oh, this is a really important win today. Like, I would prefer it if you helped them have the right mindset with their prep, right? And they're really receptive to that because it fits in with the overall structure, and it's a learning opportunity. It's not like oh, they're getting in my way, right? And Neo, for example, is one of these people that just loves League of Legends, right? I think Neo historically has come in and like been very reactive and acted a lot inside his League of Legends team, and that's because he loves League of Legends and he's really passionate about it. Neo watches our scrims not because he's spying on me or because he's trying to find dirt on me or because he's going to medal, right? He watches our scrims because he really, really likes League of Legends. He really wants to win in League of Legends, and he actually wants to learn, and he's genuinely interested about it. So when I write reports to Neo, I include things that actually help him to understand from my perspective, this is what happened in the game and this is why we won or lost, and this is really worth celebrating, and this is an issue that we have, and this is what we need to do to fix it. So that again, he comes away with the same impression from me, because when you have a really involved management, they're going to make their own opinions, right? And their own opinion might be different to yours. Their own opinion might be, this player is completely inting and this player is blah 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 blah, or this player isn't even trying, what are they doing? And you need to make sure they're on the same page with you there, because that might be a player that is going through something that they have no idea about, or a player that had a really awful day because of other factors, or a player that like is actually doing the right thing, but none of their teammates are in the right place, and so they look stupid and die. um, and that's something that is your job to re-educate people on, and to use it as a coaching opportunity, right? You have to coach your upper management as well, and there's no shame in that. It's not to say that I'm superior to them in any way, right? Like, it's coaching and mentoring people is a two-way street. It's one of the wonderful things about coaching.
Great. Well, I mean, there's as you know, we only got to like half the things I sent you. But I think what I'd like to do is end with the quickfire questions I'm asking everybody. So we'll start with, who are the people or coaches that you look up to or idolize, either right now or early on in your career? Who comes to mind?
Homer, Phil Jackson, Greg Popovich, John O'Sullivan, Pete Carroll. Who else? What's his name? There's a guy who did the Netflix documentary called Last Chance U Basketball. God, what's his name? John Mosley. I love John Mosley. He's great. If you haven't watched Last Chance U Basketball, not NFL, go and watch the basketball one. It's so good.
I will. I love it. One of the reasons I love asking this question is I basically just write down any names I don't know about. So now I'm just getting a longer and longer list because everyone says like 3 or 4, 1 or 2. I'm like, oh yeah, and then so it's an infinitely growing list, but it's still a good thing to ask.
John Mosley is such a psychopath, and I adore him. And he has so much passion and so much grit, and he cares so much. And he is literally, in terms of his style, he's the polar opposite to me. And I gained so much from him, and I respect him so much. So massive respect to John Mosley.
What's the biggest hardship you've experienced as a coach?
Benching Rika after spring 2022, because I felt like his teammates and I, the veterans on the team that were supposed to take care of him, let him down. And he was working really hard. The guy had great work ethic. He was really driven. He wasn't there yet. He may not necessarily have been ready. There were loads of things he didn't understand, and he didn't necessarily always make it easy for himself. But I should have been there making it easier for him, and I let him down. And seeing the look on his face when I told him that he wasn't coming back in summer is something that I never want to repeat in my entire career again.
What's your top highlight as a coach?
First LEC championship, because of reverse sweep and because that team was so close. I have so many very precious memories from that year. More recently, watching Hilly lift another trophy after 5 years. That was by far the best thing about MAD Lions 2023.
Well, I hadn't realized that it was so long. I just like, it's just always at the top. That I just assumed it couldn't have been 5
Fnatic
years.
2018.
Okay. What are 3 non-negotiable behaviors that you and people around you need to buy into?
Taking ownership, listening, being kind.
Great. And last question. If you from today could give yourself one piece of advice when you first started your coaching journey, what would it be and why?
Read more. Stop being so fucking stubborn.
What was it? What's the story there? I have to know. Why did you didn't used to read much and now you do a lot, or?
How much did I read when I first joined LEC? I don't know, when did I really first start reading a lot? I started reading a lot about coaching in about 2020. So I think there were 2 years, 3, even 3.5 if you count the time before that, where I was just kind of flipping it and doing my own thing. And I really thought that coaching was just like knowing League of Legends good. And surprise, it's not. So yeah, that and I'm really stubborn. I'm really, really stubborn and opinionated, and it's really common in people who are quite driven. And usually the worst arguments in all the teams I'm in are between me and the most driven players. So in my team, it's between me and Hilly or me and Vitya are the absolute worst arguments that the team ever have, because we're all stubborn and driven, and we love the game, and we like the sound of our own voices, and we like to think we're right. And that behavior prevented me from listening and developing better relationships and understanding people for a long time.
Okay, well, thanks very much for coming on. It's really like eye-opening as a conversation. I think, you know, I took a lot from it, but I also think everyone watching as well will really appreciate how much you guys are sharing. I mean, Pad was the same, but I just think this openness is just going to be nothing but good for Europe. So thanks very much for coming on, and I'll definitely have to have you on again.
All good, man. Looking forward to it.